Love that logo in the background there, Rob.
Yes, that
Thanks, buddy.
happy podcast day.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Francesco, it's great to see you again.
Hi, everybody. Hi, great to see you.
Super. This is going to be an exciting discussion. And Rob, I think you have another person too later, so just let me know and we'll get them in. And I'm going to turn it over to you because people are tired of hearing me over the past 20 hours or so already.
Okay.
So you guys have a great time, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I appreciate it, and thank you for tuning in to International Podcast Day. This is exciting to do this. I think this is the second or third year that I've done a live stream on the event here. And like I said, thanks for joining us and supporting podcasting. It's great. My name is Rob Greenlee. I'm the head of content at Spreaker. I'm a former manager of podcasts at Microsoft, Zune, and Xbox for many, many years. And I host the Spreaker Live Show live every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern at SpreakerLiveShow.com. And it's a show that I do to support podcasting and to get the word out about tips and tricks on how to do a terrific podcast. And I also do another live show called the New Media Show with Todd Cochran at newmediashow.com, and that's Saturdays at 9 a.m. Pacific and noon Eastern. Since Spreaker is a sponsor of the event, I wanted to mention a little bit about Spreaker. If you haven't checked out Spreaker, go to Spreaker.com. It's a complete platform, and it's a terrific option for podcasters that maybe want to do some live streaming as well. So it's combining live streaming with podcasting. And the platform offers free recording and live streaming apps, and then also some listening apps too. And we have widget players and stuff. And I think that the prior hour really kind of detailed out there and talked about Spreaker a little bit, and I appreciate all that. But in this hour, I wanted to just kind of bring on some terrific guests to talk about kind of the past, present, and future, a little bit of podcasting, and kind of bring in a little bit of context from the individuals that are on this show here to give their perspectives and to also talk about their history and their own experience in this medium too. I think that there's a lot of talented people that are involved in the podcasting space. They're creating terrific content and building big audiences, and I think other podcasters can actually learn from that. And so joining me, I've got Rob Cesternino, who's the host of Rob Has a Podcast. It's an award-winning show. He's been at many podcast awards and brought home all the hardware, Rob. So, that's your reputation. And then you also do a show called post-show recaps.
Yes. I podcast reality TV on Rob Has a Podcast, and I talk about scripted TV on post-show recaps.
Yeah, exactly.
But my favorite thing to talk about is podcasting with you, Rob.
We actually do very unique shows together. I think it would be fun to actually for us to do a podcast together. I think it would be fun. So
sure. What do you want to talk about?
I would enjoy that. Just talk about nothing.
Okay.
Just like we normally do. So, and then also joining me in the square on the right is Francesco Baschieri, who's the CEO of Spreaker. I work with Francesco all the time, and he lives in really a difficult place in the world. He lives in Venice.
Wow, that's tough. Yeah.
Well,
you can't get that by car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You have to have a boat to get there. So I've actually been in his flat there. So amazingly enough. So welcome, Francesco.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm calling in from Bologna, but it's still in Italy.
Oh, you're in Bologna. See,
I'm at my parents' house. Yeah, I'm bouncing around. I was visiting my parents tonight, and so I got this like microphone, which probably I'm ashamed compared to your gear, guys, but I hope it sounds good enough.
No, those things are actually terrific for podcasting. Actually, Rob, have you used those iPhone?
I don't
headphones?
use them myself, but I am frequently talking to people using them, and I feel like if somebody is on that and they have a decent connection, or even if they're on Skype, then more often than not, it's pretty good.
So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take it.
Yeah.
before we kind of jump into really talking about the topic that I want to talk to these guys about, I wanted to mention at the 30-minute mark at 12:30, I'm going to be bringing on another guest. His name is Ken Rutkowski, and he's going to join us. And he's a very early online audio show creator going back to like 1996. He was probably, I think, one of the original pioneers of this medium, not specifically podcasting, but doing a show online. And so anyway, he's going to join us. But kind of moving on, guys. What kind of era do you guys think we're in right now? I mean, as far as with podcasting, it's been 12, 13 years that this medium has been around. I mean, what's your guys' thoughts? I mean, what's the dominant thing that dominates your thoughts as you think about this medium?
Rob, you want to start? Take it first?
Well, I would say that for me, I think what's really most exciting to me about podcasting right now is that more and more people are sort of like becoming accustomed to downloading and listening to a podcast. I think that we have a lot of people who are listening to their first podcast, frequently. That's something that people go and check out. And so it's a nice time where the medium is still considered, I think, exciting and new, and a lot of people are coming on board for the first time, but we haven't yet been completely oversaturated. So I feel like that there's a lot of people coming into the space right now as listeners, which is nice.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, go ahead, Francesco. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm saying I totally agree with Rob Cesternino, and I think the really exciting thing that is waiting us in the next 12 months is like this new bunch of people were coming on board, listening to their first podcast ever. And I really think we have the opportunity to give them something totally different from what it used to be in the old days. I mean, it doesn't have to be the same experience of podcasting that happened, like, I don't know, 12 years ago. I'm mostly talking in technical terms rather than content terms.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like what's really turned this around is content. I mean, I think that there's a lot more terrific shows out there. I think I don't know, is that something that you guys see as well? I mean, is there just more competition, Rob, for your efforts out there, or
I mean,
are you
certainly
doing a unique enough thing?
Well, there's a lot of competition, and I do feel like there's also a lot of great shows. I mean, I do think that the ease of creating a podcast has made it to the point where, 5-6 years ago, you really had to be, a pretty technologically savvy to be able to launch a podcast, get an episode out. And now, I mean, depending on how loosely you define a podcast, people could, just be hitting a button on their phone and recording something and posting it to their, to their channels. People could be posting things on YouTube and Snapchat. Facebook Live certainly has made things a lot easier for people just to be able to push a button and go. And the equipment is just getting better where, 5 years ago, what you could do on your phone was pretty crappy. And now things you could do on your laptop, on your phone without any additional equipment is still pretty good. I mean, just like those, iPhone headphones, which they're getting rid of the headphone jack for. I mean, it's still pretty good to be able to record with. So it has made it easier for anybody to come along and compete. But I do think that the shows that still have done best practices still are tending to be the most successful shows.
But
and I also think that. Go ahead, Francesco.
Maybe I'm a bit behind you guys because I'm so far away, but I just want to pick your brains. What about the big guys, the big media companies or the new plays, literally flooding this market with new content, heavily produced, high quality? Do you think this plays a big role into the fact that the market is getting overcrowded when it comes to content, or do you think there's space for everybody into specific niches?
You want me to handle that?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the thing about these big companies that end up getting into the podcast space, I think it's sort of like a difficult thing to be able to monetize and be able to keep the quality high. I know that I've listened to some podcasts that come out that I'm excited to hear, and I just find that the amount of commercials that probably are required to be able to sustain podcasts, that like for a major media company to be able to make the investment into going into podcasting and have, full-time employees working on churning out the podcast, they need to really be able to monetize these shows. And you find that you're listening to a podcast where every 10 minutes they're stopping to talk about a commercial. And certainly, I too have commercials in my podcast, and I think that it's definitely something that is necessary. But I do think that part of the appeal of podcasting is a lack of commercial interruption. And I feel like that there is a little bit of a dangerous tipping point that we're headed towards, where that things are starting to, I feel like, at least from the big time, content creators or the big media companies, that when we have 5-6 commercials in a podcast, I think it starts to become just we're listening to recorded radio. And I think that part of the appeal of podcasting is, a limited number of commercial interruptions.
Yeah, it seems like that we are in this era where the balancing between the needs of the advertiser and the needs of the audience are really what's at stake here. I mean, it seems like it's easy for ad buyers to run just radio ads in audio content. But really, where the results are is in more like podcast formatted ads. And Rob, so how are you kind of juggling that? I mean, is that I'm sure you're concerned about how that impacts your audience.
Sure,
right?
It's very tricky, and the advertising in podcasting is still an area that the advertisers, I think, are used to one thing from radio or other sorts of advertising platforms that they've worked with. And for me, I'm just always going to be trying to look out for my audience, because I feel like that these advertisers, you could bend over backwards and give them what they want. And I think they, at the end of the day, they could leave you and go off to some other show that they feel like is going to give them a better return on their investment. Where I feel like if I at least always try to do right by my audience, and what I really try to do is try to, have as few interruptions as possible while still being able to have advertising in the show. I think that you want to try to cater to the audience more so than the advertiser, because without that, I think that that's really the bond that really makes podcasting special between the host and the audience.
Mm-hmm. So do you guys think that there's going to come a time when small podcasters can benefit from creating some revenue around advertising and sponsorship? I mean, because it seems like that the big shows are getting all the action now, right? What do you guys think it's going to take to make that benefit kind of spread out across a larger group of shows?
Well, can I take this?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
My point of view, I don't think it's I'm sure. Of course, you guys have a point with the commercial load of this of these professionals, say like big media companies podcast. But I don't think necessarily the fact that these guys are investing big in podcasting is necessarily a bad thing for independent podcasters as well. On one side, they have shown that there's potential in podcasting up to the point where they realize this might be a viable channel for a bigger type of enterprise. And on the other side, they're investing their public relations clout and their advertising money to promote the medium, which eventually is going to be good for everybody, right? And so I really believe that if you, for instance, you, Rob, if you stay true to your own format and your own commercial load and what you think is a good quality product, eventually the audience is going to decide. If they don't like the level of advertising that they get into commercial podcasts, they move back to independent podcasts. It would be a win. But I definitely think there's going to be space for independent media producers in the field of podcasting to be able to monetize to their creation, even to some interesting points for the most successful ones, of course.
Rob, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think that there isn't exactly a marketplace at this point where a sponsor who can't afford getting on a big show is able to get matched up with a host or a content creator who isn't able to attract a big sponsor. But I do think at some point we will have some ability to have some Tinder of smaller podcasters and smaller people looking for, I don't mean to say smaller, but a advertiser who is looking to spend less and have less of a reach for a specific niche product. I do think that we will get to the point where that whatever the Google AdWords is of podcast advertising, I think that eventually we're going to get to that point. Somebody who's smart enough to figure that out will get there.
Yeah, it seems like that there needs to be a new kind of methodology here to actually monetize those folks and maybe engage those audiences in a different way than how it's traditionally been done. And I just don't know that that's been invented yet.
No, I don't think it has. I think there's some sort of exchange that is going to be out there. Because right now that for these advertisers, they work with an agency who works with a network, and they just don't have the bandwidth, figuratively, to deal with 200 different podcast hosts. They just want to deal with a couple of the people that work at these major networks and deal with talking to 5 or 6 people as opposed to talking with every single podcast host that's out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I put myself in the shoes of an advertiser, I'd rather be happier to get, instead of getting, let's say, 100,000 leads or potential listeners from a show where they're not that engaged because it's like a generic show, I'd rather get 100 show with 1,000 super engaged listeners where I can communicate my product out. They're going to realize this. It's just that this technology piece, which is not that small, that is missing. The tech itself isn't that tricky, but there are some tricky parts there. But I'm pretty sure we're going to see something like that emerge in the next 12 to 18 months, probably.
Rob, so as you do your host reads and things like that for the advertisers that you have, so what are you learning from that? What's the tricks that you've learned to actually get people to convert?
Well, what I do try to do, and again, I don't hit 100% on this, is I do try to tailor the read to be as close to, at least having something to do with what we're talking about in the episode, and try to at least put a joke or two along the way. That the tricky thing for me is that when you have these scripts, when you stray too far from the script, and I know you're always given the note to like, oh yeah, improv with this, really, have fun with it. But then if you end up saying either saying something that's not consistent with the advertiser's message, or not even like saying anything offensive, but something that's like, oh, you said that this is you said that this product is healthy, and you're really supposed to say that it's better for you. Then you can't say it's healthy. We want to make good on this product because you didn't get so you are, I think, bound a little tight in this area, where I do feel like that the sponsors would probably convert better if they were a little more freewheeling with the hosts and the copy that gets read.
Yeah, and I think what it's really pointing to is it needs to be natural. It needs to make sense. It needs to flow as real as possible, right? It can't be contrived or words that you wouldn't normally use to describe something in your own language, right?
Right. I wish that they would be a little bit more results-based, where if I know what the product is, let me talk about it for a minute in a way that I think will convert with my audience. If it doesn't work, then, feel free to pull the ads, because they're going to pull the ads anyway if I don't convert. And I think I've got a better chance to be able to sell their product if I can put it in a way that I think is going to work with my audience, as opposed to having to, say what they've written for me and then only make some, very quick asides about it. Or I can, go on after I've said everything they said and continue to talk about it. But it's very tricky.
Yeah. Do you ever pre-record your host reads?
I don't. I like to try to keep it alive, because I do feel like that at the point where the audience has heard this recorded read before, I feel like that they really just tune out and they're just waiting for the show to come back, or they're hitting the skip button. If it's live, I think that maybe they're saying, okay, well, maybe there's something in here that might be funny or something I might have not heard before. But I have had sponsors where they asked me to record something ahead of time so they could approve it and then just play the recorded approved thing a couple times. And I don't know if that's had great success, considering that the sponsors did not continue that campaign. I'll guess that it didn't.
So I guess, I mean, is it possible that you see those pre-recorded host reads being fed into a ad insertion system? Is that something that you're considering or thinking about doing?
I definitely use that type of system, and it certainly is easier on my end. I just don't know if it's more effective for the sponsor.
Gotcha.
I sense that it isn't.
Okay. Yeah, it's always better to be more organic, right, with it. Yeah, I wanted to talk to both you guys too about the struggle that we're seeing in the market a little bit right now around streaming versus downloading. There's certain sectors of the podcasting space that are like pushing against downloads because there's a lack of listener metrics. And Spreaker is, Francesco with Spreaker, it's you guys are combining streaming and downloading together. What was your thinking about that early on, back when you started the company 6 years ago? Were you trying to do both, or what was the strategy that you thought about with that?
So originally, we wanted to support live streaming and live broadcasting. So we implemented a streaming server, and we used the same exact technology for playing pre-recorded content. And that was the easiest thing that we could do to push out the product. Over time, we don't actually use streaming anymore when we play what to a listener appears as stream. We use normal HTTP request, which would count as a download if we get or as let's say as a partial download if you get the stream from a third party. I think the real difference here is if you know what's happening in the client application, the listening application, and that's a big difference. So technically, on the server side, streaming and downloads today most of the time look really the same when you examine the server logs. On the client application, you actually know when people listen to, and that's a key piece of information that today all the advertisers want to know something about. So just to give you the answer, historically, we differentiate the terms, but today we're trying to change this terminology to talk to people about what we call on-platform consumption, which is the type of consumption where we can certify that somebody listened to a specific segment of the show or even the ad, because we control the client application or the player, whether it's the HTML embeddable player or the iOS app or the Android app, and what we call off-platform, which are requests from all the other podcatcher application where we get a request, but we cannot really know for sure or 100% sure whether it's a download or a progressive download, which actually counts as streaming.
Rob, what percentage of your audience is consuming your content on a stream?
I really don't know off the top of my head. I would assume that most people are download based. I do think that there are some people that are either listening either from our website or also from our app that we have. But I would imagine that most people are listening through traditional means of downloads via iTunes or a podcatcher.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, so as you guys kind of look to like the next couple of years or whatever, what do you guys think is the next big thing for podcasting and the growth? I mean, what can the industry do to spike listeners, or is it convenience of listening? Where do you see the opportunity?
Okay.
That's a tough question. I mean, just in terms of what I'm thinking is trying to do more live, more video, because I do think that audio is not ever going to be going away, but I do feel like that there is going to be more of that people are going to expect there to also be a video version and also a live version as, things, the bandwidth gets better and the quality of what we're doing, continues to get better. So I do think that people are going to be looking for more platforms to be able to see that content in addition to hear it.
So you think that the growth of like a platform like Snapchat is an indication of that?
I think that Snapchat is more in terms of a ability it's more of a marketing tool than anything specifically that we're going to be using in podcasting. But I do feel like that people want to have that sort of real-time relationship with the content creator. And I think that Snapchat is a really great tool to be able to do that, like a Twitter where people are able to sort of write text back and forth. Snapchat, I think, is able to sort of like really go behind the scenes of what a podcaster or content creator is doing.
Francesco, what do you think about that question? Yeah.
Well, I agree that people are going more and more multi-platform when they think of content. So one single platform is not enough. But I really think the issue here is audio. I mean, I think audio by itself has a lot of opportunities, and there's going to be, even in the future, and probably more and more in the future, some use cases of consumption where audio is the only media that you can use, the only medium that you can use. So the thing is, how do we spark the audience to consume more on-demand audio, more than what we see on the stats today? And I think the only possible answer to that is content. What cases like Serial have shown us is that people are willing to try something new if the content is compelling enough, is good enough, and gets promoted enough. But then the vicious circle, the conundrum here is that we're going to see more interesting content pop into the space only if the monetization opportunities of the space grow. So I really think it's going to grow in cycle. And I think the next step in this cycle is really about monetization opportunity, because I see a lot of these big media companies that I mentioned earlier that have taken a leap of faith and jumped quickly into podcasting. If they are going to see results in terms of their investment, they're going to stay there and keep their audience there, and maybe spark a new wave of content creators joining this and in turn getting more audience. But if this first wave doesn't see a clear path to monetization like it happened 10 years ago or something, then we're stuck. So it's going to grow in circle, in loops.
Yeah, I am a little concerned about the fact that we may be in a content bubble right now, and I think we have seen this before. Like you said, many years ago, when the growth of content production kind of got ahead of the audience, and then there was kind of a little bit of a pullback on content production, and then the audience kind of caught up, and then now we've seen another lunge forward with Serial being kind of the catalyst, right? And it does kind of make me wonder. Yeah,
I think it's very different today because probably 10 years ago there was a real issue with the user experience of consuming this medium. Today there's not. That's what I think that Serial did great. But in order to get people to consume this audio, of course, you need great content, but you also need to invest a little bit promoting this content and this medium as well. You're gonna try and put some of your advertising dollars or on-air space or whatever promoting this new digital media. And that's something that a lot of traditional media companies are not doing because they fear hurting their terrestrial audience or their actual audience. And so that's the issue here, because I really think that if today you go big and start promoting podcasts on TV or on other channels, we'll see a lot more audience getting to this medium. They are not doing this because they're scared of losing on the other side.
Yeah.
I also think that the traditional media needs to really have a better understanding of what people love about podcasts and why podcasts have become so popular. And I think that a lot of the stuff that I see produced by media companies is very short, is quick, with numerous commercial interruptions, and I think is probably maybe even like too polished, where it feels very safe. And I do think that what people enjoy about podcasting is the sort of I hate to say lack of polish, but I do think that there is something where it's sort of like that there are very few barriers between the host and the audience, and it does feel like something that is more organic and less steps that went from the content creator to the person who's listening. And I think that people need to just like let podcasting breathe a little bit more, and I think that it can be successful as opposed to treating it like it is, traditional radio.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, Rob, thank you so much for joining me on the International Podcast Day.
Well, happy International Podcast Day to both of you. I really tried to. I was very excited that my family did not make a big fuss. I thought my wife was going to make me breakfast. I thought my kids were going to sing to me for International Podcast Day. It was nothing.
Yeah, and Robin, we actually had a normal conversation. It wasn't as crazy and out of control.
It wasn't that crazy. I tried to be on my best behavior for International Podcast.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
All right, take care.
Okay,
bye.
Bye. All right, so up next we have Mr. Ken Rutkowski, who's going to come in and join us. He's a very early online audio show pioneer, really. Ken, welcome to the show. Oh, Ken, we can't hear you yet. So, yeah, see if you can turn up your mic. Oh, not quite yet. We're almost there.
Not working.
No. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I can't hear you. Darn it.
No.
Nope, not yet. We still can't hear you. Yeah. Try calling back in again. So, but anyway, Ken is.
Rob.
What's that?
It was a nice talk, the one we had with Rob.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah, he's a great guy. He's been involved in the space for a few years now. It hasn't been around that long, but he certainly had an impact on the space, definitely. But Ken, that's going to join us here, I can give a little bit of background while he's trying to come back in here. He started actually doing an online audio show back in 1996. So I would say he's one of the early pioneers of this medium at Ken Radio, at kenradio.com. Actually, I worked a lot with Ken in the past, back with my own radio show prior to when podcasting started. And both of us were doing a lot of streaming type stuff back then. And he's been the host of a nationally syndicated radio show called Business Rockstars. And it was on like 100 radio stations across the country. He used to host a show on CNET Radio and was on the XM Satellite Radio Network for many years. But he also has a podcast, over the years. So hopefully he'll be able to come back in and join us here in a second.
I'm sure he will. It's an
But
impressive
if not, Francesco will have to talk
not.
about some things.
I'll have some fun. I should have my 2 cents to add to what you and Rob were talking about. At the end, and about this all this content from established media companies getting into the space. Again, I repeat myself. I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, right? Every time a new medium starts, established companies try and replicate what they did in another medium into the new one, like a template. They copy it and they do mistakes, but eventually they learn. And in the process, they shift some of their audience to the new medium. They create interest in the new media, and I think we all need it if we want this to grow faster and not to plateau.
And I think that also there's a lot of these newer podcasting companies, like Gimlet and Panoply and all these that are creating a lot of original content that is pure podcasting. And I guess my concern is that there's so much great content coming out, and that hopefully the audience is there to support it. Because the last thing I would want to see is just a huge amount of content coming through that there's no audience for, and the content creator stops producing it because it can't generate enough money. So, hey, Joseph.
Hey, how are you? This is the first time I got to speak to you, Rob. Heard about you, but never spoke to you for real.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the International Podcast Day.
Thank you. I wish I would be able to see more of it, but I literally was just able to tune in, had other things, so I'm so glad.
Yeah. Well, so are you doing a podcast? I don't know what you tell us about. I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. So my name is Joe Berman. A bunch of people in the podcast industry know me more as the Pod to Pod guy. We have this cool website that just is like basically everything about podcasting on there, and it started off as a newsletter. So it's just a curation of everything that's going on in the space. Yeah,
I'm a big fan of your site. You do a terrific job of covering the podcast space. So it's great because this whole medium has needed some online kind of news coverage.
Yeah.
And it really hasn't really existed. There's been a couple that have tried in the past, and there's a few like podcasternews.com is one.
Sure, that's great.
And a few others, but it's great that you're jumping in there and trying to provide that.
It's been a hustle.
I'll bet it has. Yeah. Well, yeah. So why don't you tell us, kind of about what the website offers and what you're doing it, and how maybe podcasters can help you out.
Okay, I mean, I'll start more of the history of how it came to be, because every podcaster enjoys a good story.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I was a podcast listener. I got an entire business education listening to podcasts. So, no, that's just the reality. So it meant a lot to me, and I was just playing around. I was doing a newsletter for the company I was with, and I went to Social Media San Diego. It's just social media. It was on Social Media Day, June 30th, 2014. I think that was the date. And there was a panel of podcasters talking, and I was benefiting so much from the podcasting media myself. And then I noticed that there's no hub for it. So I asked the people on the panel. It was Mike Stelzner, John Lee Dumas, and Tyler Anderson.
Oh.
And yeah, so I asked them if they should. I got different responses. A few weeks later, I was at Podcast Movement with my little poster over there, and we launched a few weeks before then. We had a few, and I was just every single week I would put out content covering the industry, and I really got to know the players and the shakers. And ever since, it's just been like exponential. The medium's been exponentially powerful, and there's more and more interest from the industry side of things. And then a few months ago, we started a website. Matthew Passy joined up with me, and now we created a website, and it's really like we consider it the media company for podcasting. I think I just did a full pitch right there.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, that's great. So how do you accept submissions, or is it an organic thing for you guys where you just gather stuff up that's going on in the podcasting space yourselves? But are people submitting things to you? Do you like announcements, press releases? What's the process that a company can submit their news?
It's a mix, but it's mainly manually scrubbing the internet and filtering for the right content. It's a grind.
Yeah, I would imagine trying to find the hottest news and things like that, but I also know that you link to articles that are out there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. That's great.
Basically, anyone with a perspective, we like to show them, because that's kind of the beauty of podcasting, that is just an open channel for anybody with a perspective to say something interesting or unique. And we love to get those unique stories, those unique things about the medium. I mean, today I just saw someone post a video that it was Jessica Rhodes with Jan for Podcaster Success Summit. She posted a video that podcasts with less than 100 downloads drove enough influence to bring revenue. I forgot the number, but it was a few $100s in revenue to the Podcaster Success Summit. Things like that just show the power of the medium.
Yeah, I mean, that would be fantastic. I mean, at least pay for all their hosting bills and all that kind of stuff, and maybe help pay for their microphones.
Yeah.
It's a good start, though.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about that topic earlier about how to monetize this for smaller podcasters too, because it's been a need that's been craved and wanted by the podcast community since this medium started. Everybody wanted to quit their day jobs, but it was difficult even back in the early days to actually do that. And in some ways, it really hasn't gotten tremendously easier to do it. But I think as audiences have overall grown, I think we're up to like 98 million people have ever listened to a podcast in the U.S. You're getting to a scale that has the real potential to help monetize to larger groups of content.
Yeah, I think the real people who are monetizing off podcasting at this point are the big brands. They're the ones who are like paying for audiences and getting good results. The three that come to mind are MeUndies, Casper, and Harry's Razors, which a big percent of their budget, I understand, is podcast advertising. But those are the people right now, actually profiting, I think, the most off the industry. But the podcasters are starting to realize their influence, and there'll be a little bit of moving and shaking there, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Joe, I hate to cut this short, but I need Spreaker to finish up their session.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yep.
They have another guest.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
I could leave.
Nice to talk to you, Joe.
So we got Ken?
Guess no.
Okay. Well, no Ken.
Okay.
All right.
Oh, so we can have a chat, Rob. I mean, it's a great
Ken?
opportunity. We don't chat that often.
I know. We just don't talk enough. I know.
There he goes. There's Ken.
Well, Ken is here. Okay, he's coming again. Hopefully his microphone's hot.
His microphone's working now, right?
Yes.
All right.
Ken,
Awesome.
welcome to the show.
Great.
Hey guys, it's good to be here.
It's great to have you on the program with us, Ken. It's been a few years, so it's great to talk with you.
It's been a few years. You're still. Where are you? Where are you, Rob? Are you still up in Seattle?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Is it still raining?
It's not quite raining yet, so we're still in the fall where it's a little nice weather. But I know you don't like to come up here because it's too cold.
I'm from
right?
Chicago. I'd rather stay in Los Angeles where it's warm. I was real quick. I wanted to make a comment on some of the things I'm listening on where podcasting has to transform and change.
Yeah.
And if you look at somebody actually who's based in John Lear, who's the CEO of Mobile, and he's a very outspoken CEO. And what he is doing is using social media in probably the most impressive ways. So from Google Stories to Snapchat, doing these awesome things on Facebook where he does cooking classes every single Sunday. He's taking this and allowing the audience to say, what's the best, chopping it up and turning into a podcast. So he's using all social streams to create a podcast based upon what people love. It's a gutsy thing to do, but he's getting hundreds of thousands of listeners by doing this. But he's utilizing social media to create the podcast, where we most of the time see social media, or we see social media picking up what the podcast has said. He's doing it in inverse. Very interesting concept.
Yeah. So how does he actually produce something? It's done specifically for each of those social platforms.
Yeah,
Is that
I'm gonna go on Instagram right now. So I'm gonna pop up. Have you used Instagram Stories?
I have not personally. No, I have not.
So once you go on Instagram, let me see if I could turn this around so you could see this. I'm gonna Got it right here. I'm going to type in John, and you'll see in a moment. John Legier. So he's the first one that pops up, who's a friend. And then what you see, hopefully you'll be able to hear this. So he's at these T-Mobile stores. He's making this run across the stores. So these are his 10-second. Then he does 1 minute on this. And then he does a half hour on Facebook where he does a cooking class every single Sunday. And then what he's doing is he's turning that into a podcast that on the T-Mobile store for both Android and iOS.
Oh, okay.
Brilliant what he's doing. But I think this is the way of the future, is where you combined everything. And the podcast has just changed so radically, and no one's really taking advantage of all the social media tools. Maybe Tim Ferriss and Dave Asprey are the ones that are doing this because they're testing it first on social media before they dive into their podcast.
Well, Ken, let's go back in time a little bit. I want to talk to you a little bit about the origins of this medium. I know you were doing an online radio show, Ken Radio, and even further back,
it was called T Talk. So in 95,
yeah, I was involved, with you with T Talk way back in those days, and that was like 99. But you started that in like 97, right?
95. I started
95.
95, and what we did is I learned something back then, and it was all around something called conditional access. So ISPs in different countries, say from Australia to South Africa to Hong Kong, they would charge their subscribers a fee to go outside their network. So if somebody in Australia wanted to see something that's in the US, it went against their data caps. So what I did was I produced this daily show, a half-hour show, and I went to all the top ISPs around the world. And I said, every day I will download my show to your local server. So when somebody would listen to my show, it would go against their data cap. So I had about 25 big ISPs, Telstra down in Australia, Hong Kong Telecom, South Africa Telecom. They picked up my show on a daily basis. So they promoted it locally. So when you went to their telco page, which if you remember, everything back then was called On Deck, they would promote my show. So I had this massive international following because they can get really good US content, not going against their data cap. That's what I did.
Yeah. And then also back in the early days too, a platform called Sync and Go. You remember that?
Sure do. It was Microsoft. It was a great platform.
Both of us. And what's really ironic about that is that was like in 2003 to 2005 time frame. And it worked exactly like podcasting. It was really one of only a couple of real precursors to podcasting. That
was Dave Fester and his team. Dave, Gary Scher, Will Poole, they put something together really smart at Microsoft. And it's unfortunate they really dropped the ball because theoretically they could have done what Apple has done for the podcast. They just didn't see the mobile device as important. Because if you remember, Microsoft didn't make a mobile device. They only made the mobile operating system. So
it was Pocket PC. It was Pocket PC back then, right?
That's right. Dell had number one at that point in time, but there was no traction because it was so expensive.
Yeah, well, and but it had all the same principles that podcasting has today. It has a client software like iTunes. It was the same kind of thing that was on Windows XP, and then client software on the Pocket PC, and you dock it and you synchronize it.
What was the nicest back then, if you remember, Rob, was the analytics. They gave us great analytics.
Well, plus they paid us.
They paid us too, but they gave us analytics. So we knew where our listeners were. We were able to see what part of the country was actually downloading our content on a regular basis. And come on, you go to iTunes and try to get good analytics right now. Even to this day, it's not possible. So it's Microsoft was ahead of curve, and unfortunately, they dropped the ball.
Yeah, they actually closed down Sync and Go in 2005, right when podcasting started.
Well, I think the Zune is what destroyed it. And I know you're part of that group.
Well, actually, Zune was the second largest podcast consuming platform for many years. But
what else was out there? What else?
There was others out there, kid. But you're right. There wasn't. If you talk about the two biggest companies in the world, you can't. It's
unfortunate.
Yes, it was definitely unfortunate. Well, so your Ken radio show that you did that for how many years?
Wow, for about 10 years.
10 years. Yeah.
Every
daily.
Every
This
single
was
day.
a daily show.
And then on Saturdays was a 2-hour live show.
Yeah.
And I got that syndicated. So the daily show was syndicated on traditional terrestrial radio. And what we did is I decided to go back into radio. I come from the radio world. And I started a daily show on business. I moved away from technology because I figured I could never compete with Engadget and Gizmodo because they had tons of people. And I started a show called Business Rockstars. And I did that since 2012 to just recently. I just left, got that to number 9 in the country. I replaced Sean Hannity, who was at number 9. He went to number 10. Got that in about 250 radio stations across the country every single day, 2 hours. And next month, being tomorrow, I will be in October launching my new show, which is called The Voice of Disruption, which is a daily podcast and then a weekend radio show that focuses on what's disrupting our lives and the planet today.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering what your next thing was, because you were hosting the Business Rockstars radio show, but you're moving on to something new.
I realized that Uber and Airbnb have a shelf life of disruption. How do you extend disruption? So I'm in the middle of this disruption. So my first show, which will be out, I have been upgrading my brain. I literally have been going to, I want to call it brain training classes. My IQ's gone up 15 points. And what these organizations do is they pinpoint certain areas in the brain that can be awakened through electricity and magnets. And I'm going to talk about where brain transformation is happening at a medical level. I'm not going after goofy spiritual stuff, specifically medical. And we're talking about brain and then food and then space and transportation, from the Hyperloop to what Elon Musk is doing. They're all part of the show.
Gotcha. So if you were a new content creator today, Ken, and you wanted to launch a show, how would you go about doing that these days?
So if you're going to launch a show, podcasters, if you're going to be a podcaster, understand that first, radio still is a great platform. So just don't think about podcasting. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to create content, make it so it's radio friendly. Because if you build it the right way, you can get on both radio and on the web, because anyone can do anything on the web. Just remember that. But start with social media, get that going right away. Start with your Twitter and your Facebook, and make sure it's an open platform. Use that as the tease tool before you launch the platform. The same way you would do anything around crowdfunding. You get social media working first. So before you turn on the microphone, my suggestion is design a show and tease the show out about 2 to 3 weeks before you launch it, so you have good momentum. Use the social media tools that are out there.
Do you have to have a name yourself or a following in order to pull this off?
Let's face it, Dave Asprey and Tim and a lot of these guys are friends of mine. I think that once you know you have a good product, I would tease those other fellow podcasters out there that you're going to become a force of nature and you want them as allies, and get them out there to help you with the distributions. The same way YouTubers do it. I met so many great YouTubers that didn't have a name, and they exploded because they aligned with great other YouTubers to spread their awareness.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean it's challenging now because there's so many content producers. Back when we started this, there was like a handful of us.
Nothing.
Right?
There's nothing. That's why I can't.
Yeah. Please
don't take it wrong. I hate the word podcasting. I really do, because I think it's limiting. It's almost like calling yourself a blogger. You're a new media company is what you are, because you're not just going to broadcast over the web or time shift over the web. You're going to use every other tool out there. You're going to write articles. You're going to, control a community of possible curators of your content. Podcasting is just one small asset. If you want to build something that has a following, you have to use every other tool that's out there. It's a different way of thinking. And by the way, I want to let you know, radio today is suffering. Radio today, especially the tier 2 and tier 3 markets that are out there, they need content. They hate syndicating something that sounds the same over and over again. If there is a way for you to produce a show that sounds great on the web and great in Kansas City or great in Aspen, Colorado, make sure you look at both traditional terrestrial broadcast and the internet. There's markets out there for you.
Well, Ken, I mean, I think from a podcast name perspective, I think many podcasters do think of their shows just like what you said. They may or may not call themselves a podcast, but they just kind of link themselves up with this medium. I know even the guys at Audible now, I mean, and you've known Audible for a long time. They're kind of hitching their wagon to the podcasting momentum right now too.
I mean, you look at Spotify. Spotify is going to be buying, of course, SoundCloud. We'll see that happen. They have podcasts on there. Spotify has been doing it. I think the name is there, but I'll just tell you, if you go to a sponsor or an advertiser, if you say podcast, and I'm talking about a real big sponsor, they put you in this little corner, and that little corner is all about metrics and not movement. And if you say you're a broadcaster and you're on radio, because remember, radio, especially if you're in a tier 2 or tier 3 market, they don't have an ADI and they don't have a measurement of their audience. They talk about basically how big our population is, how many are radio stations. To get an advertiser or a sponsor on radio is much easier than getting an advertiser or sponsor on a podcast. Mm-hmm. And it's just because traditional media doesn't understand this media yet. They really don't. They look for engagement. And they look for some type of traction and reaction. And if you can't satisfy that, you're not going to make a ton of money on podcasting.
So is reaching radio really a way to just capture audience for your digital program?
Absolutely. So the way I'm designing it, it's a daily podcast. And that podcast will be loose and fun, but the weekend show will be produced from the podcast, but it'll be tight. And it will sound radio because there is a certain radio metric that you have to work with. You do have a distraction factor that works in radio that doesn't work on podcasts. People do switch the dial. So you do have to work with benchmarks. You do have to do things that you don't have to do on podcasting. A broadcaster learns this stuff. A podcaster isn't even aware of these things. And I'm not bashing podcasting because I love the loose and fun feel of the podcast. But sponsors and radio clocks are radically different than a podcasting clock.
Yeah. So as you, Francesco, why don't you?
Hey, Francesco.
Quick, you're working on a platform that is kind of radio-like. I mean, there's live streaming there, and it's combining with podcasting. Is there something that Ken is saying that resonates with you in trying to bridge this divide between radio and podcasts?
I never think that there was a real divide between radio and podcast apart from the content perspective.
Oops. It looks like we locked up on Fred.
Where's he based?
He's in Bologna in
Ireland or in Italy.
In Italy, yeah.
Got it. Yeah, we locked up. Just hey, I'm just stating facts. Remember in my last show, Business Rockstars, I started with a guy that started Premier Radio Network. I mean, he one of the biggest networks, and we understand both sides. I'm not saying this as in something I think. I know this. So there is a difference between the two. And let's see, does Ken get exhausted following 207? I do actually. I follow a lot of people because it's got me 320,000 people that are following me. I'm growth hacking. People are looking at my social media feeds. I'm growth hacking it. And I understand that growth hacking is a tool that I have to do. I hated Twitter, and Twitter's necessary because I have to be able to get those followers. And what I'll do is I'll unfollow those people that are not following me, but I am absolutely growth hacking. I've done the same thing on other social media tools, but it's so important to growth hack. It may not look good, but it gets you the right results. And that's what we're looking for is results. Yeah, exactly. Hey, Ken, I think we're at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for persisting and coming in and spending some time with us. It's great to have you on the program. I appreciate it, sir. Thanks a lot, Rob. Talk to you later. Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Hey, Steve.
Wow. What a discussion.
It was fun.
What a discussion. Yeah. And I really have to thank Spreaker for the past 2 years being a gold sponsor. We love working with your whole team that we do in the months leading up to this. And you guys always bring it. And your platform is amazing. And I can't say enough about you and the entire team over at Spreaker. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it's Go International Podcast Day. I'll be tweeting about it all the rest of the day.
Matter of fact, folks, we're trending #1 right now. It's not the official hashtag, but it doesn't matter. We're trending #1. So let's go.
Yeah.
Woohoo.
That's cool.